What's going on, everyone? This is Gaurav and welcome to my learning channel. So this is the first video in the series for pandas. So for today's video, first of all, we will understand what is pandas in Python, what are its usage, and then afterwards we'll take a look at something called data frame. And once we're done with that, then we'll start importing some data into the data frame. These are the different type of data like CSV, TSV, etc. And then we will try to take a look at the content of these tables. So without any further delay, let's get started. So first of all, what is pandas? I have just simply downloaded this definition from internet. So it says pandas is a fast, powerful, flexible, and easy to use open source data analysis and manipulation tool. But to be honest, in a very simple language, anything that you can do is a part of a SQL. If you would like to do it very seamlessly in Python, then probably pandas is the simplest way of doing that. Pandas give you the flexibility of creating different type of a data frame, which in a way is also called tables. And then afterwards, with a simple one-liner query, you can filter the data, you can merge the information, etc. Now, when it comes to the data frame is nothing but a two-dimensional labeled data structure with a column of potentially different data types. So in a way, we can say the data frame is something very similar to a table as we have seen in SQL. So at this point in time, we don't have to worry about data frame too much because in a few seconds, we'll take a look at the data frame, how to import the data into that, and then afterwards it will become very clearer. So as I mentioned earlier that for this video, we will first of all try to import the data into pandas, and then afterwards we'll take a look at its content. But before that, we'll have to load pandas into our memory. For that, let me just quickly run it. Then as you can see that I'm simply loading pandas into the memory and I'm giving it an alias name of PD so that next time I have to call any of the functions from panda, then I don't have to write the entire thing, but I would rather just simply write PD dot whatever the function name is. Now, in case you don't have pandas installed, you can do it various ways. You can just simply go to your terminal and you can install pandas. In order to do so, you can use something called pip, which is pip install pandas. Or you could also just download the tar.gz file and then afterwards extract it and install it. You can also install pandas from right here. So if you want to write any of the Unix command, all you have to do is just add this exclamation mark. And then afterwards, you can just simply start writing any of the Unix command. So let's say, for instance, if I want to install pandas, then I'll have to go over and do something like pip. Now over here, it says the requirement already satisfied. That's because in my case, pandas is already installed, so I don't have to worry about that. However, in case you don't have pandas installed, then this will simply go ahead and install pandas in your root. In case your Python is installed in a separate location, then afterwards you should change the location and install the pandas right over there. Let's first of all take a look at the structure of the data that we are going to import today. So these are the different type of file that we are going to read today. So you have a CSV file, you have TSV file, CSV as in the comma separated variables, TSV as in tab separated variables. Then you also have an Excel file, and we'll also be looking at how to import JSON and how to export JSON as well. Then afterwards, there are a few additional functionalities in an Excel file importing as well. So we'll take a look at that too. But before that, first of all, let's take a look at the content for CSV file. Now, given I'm using math, I will try to open this file with a text edit. So this is how the content of this file looks like. I hope this is visible. Otherwise, I'll just simply read it out. So you have customer ID, you have name, you have age and state for all of these customers. And these are all the data points. For instance, you have first customer and the name is AAAA, and then you have the age 25 and the state code is Texas. And similarly, you have other records in the table as well. So first of all, let's try to import this. Before I start using pandas to take a look at the content of the file, another option is that we can simply use Unix to take a look at the content. And for that, we can use something called a cat command. So as I mentioned earlier, that if you want to invoke any of the Unix command, all you have to do is just simply add exclamation mark and then afterwards cat. And this is where you will write the location of the file. So now I've added the location of this file, and then afterwards I've added the CSV file, which is your file name. So let's quickly try to run it. Now you can see the content of this file. So you have customer ID, you have name, age, state, and pretty much all of these details which pertains to the same 4 different variables. Now let's try to import it in pandas. So for pandas, the first function that we are going to use is called read underscore CSV. So the way to write that is PD dot read underscore CSV. So the query will look something like this. So you will write the location, and then afterwards it will have file name. Just for your reference, I'm going to go ahead and comment it out. Now let me go ahead and write the actual command, so which is read underscore CSV. And given the fact that I have already written the location and file name already here, so I'm going to go ahead and copy paste it. Now you can trigger the code. You can see the content. So you have customer ID, you have name, age, and state, and all of these are coming as a structured data. pretty much all of these things have been converted to different columns. So you have these 4 different columns in this data frame. Now you can also go ahead and save this into a data frame with a simple alias name. So you can call it df1 equals to, and with this, the content for this file will be saved into your data frame called df1. So you can take a look at the content for df1 by different ways. First and the simplest way is to just simply go ahead and write df1. And this will essentially give you the content for df1. Now there are a few problems with this approach. Let's say that you have too many different rows or too many different columns, and if you want to go ahead and show everything on the screen, then probably your computer is going to crash or your browser might crash. So you might actually want to just take a look at like first few records. For that, you can simply use df1.head, and then afterwards you can write number of rows that you would like to see. So you can see, you would like, let's say if you want to see just 2 rows, you can say df1.head and 2. This is for 2 different rows. This is your first 2 rows. And similarly, you can also go ahead and write df1.tail, and this is 2. So this is the last 2 records for the table. And now you can see that this is the 8th and the 9th record, which is for customer ID 9 and 10. And pretty much the structure remains exactly the same as we had for earlier. So hopefully this gave you a good idea about how to read a CSV file. Now do take a look at the documentation for read_CSV. They have a pretty good documentation. This is probably the simplest version of how to import a file. Now there are like a lot of different iterations of things that you can do. And some of those common ones that you should definitely remember the syntax for is how to specify the column name in case your file or the table does not have the column name. Another one is that in case you want to change the delimiter, then how to do that. Some of these basic things is going to be very useful for you if you plan to use something like Pandas for your day-to-day exercises. Now with that, let's try to import the TSV file, which is your tab separated variables. Now this is the TSV file that we would like to reference today. So let's take a look at the content for this one. Given the fact that we used text editor last time, so let's quickly go ahead and use the same. Now as you can see that you have same 4 variables, but in this case, these data points are delimited by tab, and earlier on it was delimited by a comma. So that's why it is called tab separated variables, and these are called comma separated variables. Now in order to import these, we can still go ahead and use read_CSV. We just have to go ahead and change the delimiter type. So let's take a look at that. Now this was our code for reading the CSV file. Let's quickly go ahead and copy it and paste it right here. Now we'll go ahead and make some changes so that it can read the TSV file. So first of all, let's change the file name. So you have tsv.txt. And then afterwards, we will have to specify the delimiter. By default, it will assume that it is CSV. And if you have any other delimiter, then you will have to specify that right here. Now for read_CSV, if you do not specify the type of delimiter, then by default, it is going to assume that this is a CSV file. And if you have any other delimiter, then you will have to specify it. Then the way to do that is simply just write a delimiter and then you write the delimiter type. It could be a pipe function, or it could be your tab separated variables as well. So in this case, it is tab. The way to write that is just / and then T. Now let's trigger this. Let's actually store this in a different data frame. So let's say this is a df2. Let's store this. And now let's take a look at the content for df2. As you can see that the contents remains exactly the same as we have seen for df1, because the only difference between df1 and df2 is that first one was comma separated and the second one was tab separated. However, once you convert that into a data frame, this is your structured data. So now this is how it looks like. Now with this, let's try to read the Excel file as well. Now we'll go ahead and copy the same command and paste it right here as we have done for read_CSV. The only difference here is that we will change it to read_Excel. For Excel, the name of function is read_Excel, and then afterwards we will change the name of the file. I think it's Excel file, and you don't have to specify the delimiter here. Let me just change the name of data frame as well. So let's call it a df3. Now let's trigger it. Now let's take a look at the content for df3. Now as you can see that the structure again sort of remains the same. So you have customer ID, name, age, and state. Let's also take a look at the content for the Excel file that we have just imported, which is excel file.xls. So this is how it looks like. So you have customer ID, name, age, and state. Now, one of the important thing to note here is that in this Excel file, you have just one sheet, and that sheet is called CSV file. However, in case you have multiple sheets, then if you don't specify which sheet you want to import the data from, then by default, it's going to go ahead and import the data from first sheet. So that's where Excel provides you an additional functionality of specifying sheet as well. So with that, let's take a look at another Excel file, which is Excel file_detailed, where you have multiple sheets. So in this file, you have 2 sheets. So you have cust_detail. Another one is called trans_detail. And for cust_detail, you have detail for the customers. You have customer ID, name, age, and state, and you have all of these different data points. And for trans_detail, you have details for the transaction being done by these customers. So you have customer ID, you have transaction date, and you have amount. And we have the detail for the first 3 customers. So you have customer ID 1, 2, and 3. So now let's try to import this Excel file. But on top of what we did last time, we are also going to specify the name of sheet, which is cust underscore detail and trans underscore detail. So first of all, let's go ahead and copy the same code that we used to import the first Excel sheet, where we imported it using read underscore Excel. This code also remains very similar. The only difference here is that now we'll go ahead and specify the sheet name. You have df3 is equal to pd.read underscore Excel. Then afterwards you specify the location in the file name. I think this is Excel file underscore detailed. And then afterwards you'll go ahead and specify which sheet do you want. So I think this is called sheet underscore name. And the first sheet was cust underscore detail. So let's try to import this. Let's call it a df4. Now let's take a look at the content for df4. So you can see that you have the content for df4, which is customer ID, name, age, and state, as we have seen in that Excel sheet. Now let's import the data for next sheet, which was trans underscore detail. Let's copy and paste the same code again. Let's change it to trans underscore detail, and let's store it in a different data frame, which is df5. Let's take a look at the content for df5. Now you can see that you have details for df5, which is customer ID, trans underscore date, and amount, which is the second sheet as we have seen in this Excel sheet. So hopefully this gave you a good idea about how to read an Excel file. Again, take a look at the documentation, because there are like a ton of different options that you can add on top of what I have specified over here. But at a very high level, even if you just remember the basic syntax, depending upon the different type of exercises that you're working on, you can always do a little bit of a Google search, and then you can add any additional condition that is needed. Now let's move on to the JSON file. But before we start importing the JSON file, we'll have to first of all create one JSON file, because for this particular tutorial, I have created all of these files from Excel. So I just dumped the data over there, and then afterwards I saved it in like 4 or 5 different formats. But unfortunately, Excel does not give you a direct way to save the data as JSON. However, you can do the same thing via Pandas. Let's try to do that. First of all, we have seen that we did try to import df1. df1 had content for csv file.csv, and it had information like customer ID, name, age, and state. Now let's try to export this file as JSON. So the way to export data to a JSON format is fairly simple. First of all, you will write the name of the data frame, which is df1 in this case, that you would like to export. And then afterwards, you'll write the name of the function, which is to underscore JSON. And then you just simply write the location and the name of file. So let's quickly go ahead and copy paste the location, same place that we have been working off of. And I'll go ahead and change the name of file. Name of file, let's keep the name of file as JSON file.json. Let's quickly trigger this. So now on this particular location, you should see a JSON file.json. Let's take a look at the content for this file. We'll go ahead and simply open it in a text file. Now you can see that you have these key value pairs. So you have customer ID, and 0 is a placeholder, which is the first record. And then afterwards, these are different values. So you have 1 as a customer ID. Then for the then afterwards, for the placeholder called 1, the customer ID is 2. For placeholder 2, customer ID is 3, and so on. And then afterwards, you can see that you have other variables as well. So you have name, and then again afterwards, you have different values. For the placeholder 0, you have AAAA. Placeholder 1, you have BBBB, and so on. So this is how your typical JSON file is going to look like. Now let's try to import this file again into your data frame, and let's take a look at the content. In order to load a JSON file into a Pandas data frame, the function name is read underscore JSON. So they are kind of very similar to each other. So you have read underscore CSV, you have read underscore Excel, and similarly you have read underscore JSON as well. So let's copy paste this, and let's make some necessary changes. So your JSON file's name was JSON file.json, and let's change the name of the data frame as well. So rather than calling it a df1, let's just say that this is df7. Now let's take a look at the content for df7. Let's also change the name of the function. So rather than read underscore CSV, you will have read underscore JSON. Now let's take a look at the content for df7. So now you can see that you have a structured data again. So you have customer ID, name, age, and state. So this is one of the way by which you can convert any of the data frame into a JSON, and then afterwards you can read the same into your data frames as well. Now let's spend a few minutes on how to view the data that you have in any of the data frame. So as I mentioned earlier, that you can simply go ahead and write the name of data frame, and essentially this will give you the content of that data frame, which is df1 in this case. Apart from that, you can also type .head or .tail. That will give you top X number of rows from that data frame. So df1.head2 will give you first 2 rows. Now let's say that if you want to see how many rows and columns you have in a data frame, then you can simply go ahead and type df1.shape. So this will give you 10,4. So the first number is your number of rows in that data frame, and the second number is number of columns. So you have 10 rows in df1, and then you have 4 columns in df1. You can also go ahead and use a function like len. And len is essentially just telling you what is the length, which is number of rows in this case. So len df1 will simply tell you the total number of rows, which is 10 in this case. Now let's say that if your data frame has multiple records, let's say it has like thousands of different records. And if you simply go ahead and type the name of data frame, let's say df1, Then afterwards, you will see that it will only show you top 10 or something records, and then afterwards it will show something like a dot, 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 dot. So that's because your Jupyter notebook is trying to save on memories. So you can go ahead and disable that, or you can specify how many number of rows you would like to see. And for that, you can go ahead and use something like set underscore option. So the code for the same looks something like this. So PD, which is your pandas dot set underscore option. And then afterwards you have display dot max dot rows. And then you specify the number of rows you would like to see as an output. Apart from this, you can also specify the same thing for columns as well. And then afterwards, you can specify a number of columns you would like to see, which is your number of variables. If you simply trigger this code, then this will go ahead and override whatever the by default setting you have. Now, if you want to go ahead and load all the rows on your screen in that table, then you can go ahead and do that as well. So like say, for instance, we just saw that if you want to take a look at 200 rows, then this is your command. But if you want to see everything, you just change this to none. And now if you have like thousands of different records, pretty much everything will be loaded on your screen. I would strongly advise against this because oftentimes I've seen that when I'm working in the production environment and the data in the backend is coming from your production environment, which could be stored in your Oracle database or any of the other database. And then if you have an option like this setup and then you try to load everything into the memory, then oftentimes the notebook might crash. So unless it is really needed, you should not have this option turned on by default. In order to turn this off, you can just simply go ahead and put this as a false. So hopefully this would have given you a good idea about how to read different type of files into pandas. In our next video, we'll take a look at how to filter the data and how to do some additional operations in your data frame. Thank you so much, and I wish you best of luck in your learning journey.